Let's start with the first issue, level playing field. So, as I said, it's the equal access of all applicants from all media countries participating in the media program. And when it comes to small countries, in 2014, the European Commission, actually it was the idea of the European Commission to include the automatic points for the projects coming from small countries, especially in the single and slate funding scheme, so that we would balance and equalize the applications coming from small countries. In 2017, the big countries were against it, and we lost the automatic points, particularly in the single project development scheme, but we managed to secure the 27% of the financing for the projects being below the threshold. So this is the story behind, but I would like to hear on your behalf, are you for somehow adding the automatic points for the projects coming from small countries, or how do you see the level playing field at the European level? So maybe I start with Ognian.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to say that part of the things that I was planning to say, you already covered them, which is good and bad. The other thing that you don't know is that last year there was an internal competition for director of the executive agency, and I was one of the unsuccessful applicants, which is a pity, because then I would have had more tools at my disposal to support you. And of course, coming now to the topic of the discussion, of course, it is not fair, especially to, and I don't like this division coming myself from a country that is not among the, let's say, big five. I don't like this division of low capacity or medium capacity, etc., because capacity means also the ability to produce good quality stuff, and I'm absolutely disagreeing with the statement that we are now here in this room, coming from a low capacity country, cannot produce good quality product. This is not the case at all. I can give you one example. During the last Zagreb Film Festival I was able to attend. I was really, how to say, fascinated to see this film called the Barefoot Emperor, Bosonogi Car. Yes. It's an excellent movie, and I have to tell you, in my opinion, this one and its first part, so to say, the King of the Belgians, in my opinion, these are among the two best European movies I've seen in the recent years. And the sad thing is that because of, I don't know what kind of reasons, but these two films, which actually describe or could give you an idea why the situation in Europe today is what it is, has not been seen or watched by people that take the decisions in Brussels, for example, precisely on, for example, important topics like how we are going to, or how we should go from now on. We have to introduce this level playing field. We have to give more opportunities and to give, not to give the impression that we are limiting the talent coming from, let's say, so-called low capacity countries. So as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure that this is also has been taken into consideration when the plans for the new, how to say, budget, for example, are put together. You know that in the budget proposal of the Commission for the next financial period, 2021-2027, the budget for the media program has been increased to 1.85 billion euro as compared to 1.4 at the current one. And of course, this is really going to represent a significant improvement. Of course, now we're still far from the final decision, and if you don't know the exact money we are going to dispose of, it's really, how to say, difficult to make any projections, how the whole thing is going to evolve. But in any case, this is the thinking of the Commission is precisely this: more opportunities, more resources, and equal access to all the potential players.
Thank you. So we continue with Mr. Marcich. In some of our discussions, and you were quite involved in the audiovisual media directive and the copyright, and during those times you always highlighted your fight for the small countries. So maybe you can also give us insight in combination with the level playing field.
Sure, thank you, Martina. I think Luís and I are doing some of that together, but I think it's useful to take a step back and look at European audiovisual policy, and I think we have to keep in mind that it's one of the really great European success stories. If you look at the policy instruments that have been introduced over the last several decades, and the results that they have brought in terms of stimulating European production and also then cooperation between European countries, it's something to be borne in mind and emphasized. So it's in principle a positive success story, but it's fragile. And it's fragile for a number of reasons, one of which has to do with this growing perception that the playing field isn't level. You comment on it from the perspective of the media program, and I hear you and I agree. Being categorized as low capacity is really being put in a kind of a cage, basically, that's conditioned by your own size as an economy, size as a country, which is not good. We see that also in the policy world. We were at a meeting with senior officials from the European Commission in Cannes in May, talking about how the Audiovisual Media Services Directive would be implemented, and in particular, how the provisions that relate to streaming services would be applied. Because as we all know, those are growing services. They're provided by largely American platforms that are vertically integrated. There will be 3 or 4 or 5 of them. They have a 30% essentially library quota obligation. We wanted to talk to the Commission as EFADS about how it is that small countries, these what they call low-capacity countries, are supposed to find their place in a world which will be increasingly dominated by these cross-border, vertically integrated American platforms. The high-capacity countries, with their market power, are able to impose on Netflix or Disney some conditions of production. Realistically, for us, very difficult to do. And so the question to the Commission really was, how do you anticipate meeting your cultural diversity obligations under the treaty and help smaller countries find their place in this media landscape? And basically, the answer was, sorry, we can't help you, you're screwed. That was essentially the summary answer that we got from Giuseppe Abamonte. You heard it. It was infuriating, but it is the answer we got. And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable as an answer. They have to find ways to meet a higher level obligation that they have of cultural diversity, which means inclusiveness of what they will call low-capacity countries. We're fighting on this. We will continue to fight. We're trying to influence how the directive is implemented at the national level. We're trying to intervene with the regulators, but we're not getting support from the Commission. Now, I come back. I don't want to go on. I could go on this for a while, but
Everybody can.
What we're trying to do is to be constructive and bring pressure on the institutions, on the Commission in particular, to tend to these problems, because if they don't tend to the problems, what I call the European success story at the outset of my remarks will become yet another destructive force in the unity of Europe, and they need to be mindful of that. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, because we need to all work together, politically and professionally, to make them listen to us. We already discussed before the event, but maybe you can, Luís, elaborate how you see the level playing field in the European context, especially the media sub-program.
Well, let me just be clear. I'm here not as representative of Portugal, because if that was the case, I would be very much in line with what Chris just said. But my responsibilities here are to talk a little bit what is the common position from the FATs on this matter. And it's not an easy one, as you may imagine. We are a European organization with 35 members, with all the big five and the next ones and everybody. We are actually enlarging our group quite recently here in the Balkan area with North Macedonia, Serbia and Montenegro. So we are enlarging our representation. So that's why, as president of the FAD, it's quite difficult to have a very, very clear position on this matter, because nobody really agrees in what kind of criteria would be useful for European policies regarding to have a more competitive environment to European production. And the level playing field is one of the cases. So I think what I'm afraid is that once we start talking about a very divisive matter, which is the criteria that is going to be put up on the level playing field, we forget about other real challenges that are facing our future. One of them, Chris just mentioned it, is our capacity of getting to show the results of our national talent in a very competitive environment of the entertainment industry, but also not taking the proper attention to the risks that exists in some programs that were created and aimed for low capacity countries, namely the selective programs, the single festivals support, and all sorts of distribution, the selective distribution, all that were created exactly to increase the capacity of low capacity countries to present their works in a European context. So regarding this view, the moment we live in, I sincerely think that we should be clever regarding the new criteria that has been opposed. It's not just a question of production, but also political environment, tradition of the local policies in supporting the creative industries and the film industry, but also bearing in mind that there are several other risks that tend to create a kind of a common European production product that we don't know exactly what it is, but I'm sure it's not going to be the voices from the small countries and the stories from the small countries and the products coming from the producers from these small countries. So.
Thank you. Okay, so we go to the second issue, and it's quite an alarming one, and it's regarding transparency of results. As I mentioned already in the introduction, we are speaking about public money, and everything related to the notion of the public money needs to be available, meaning visible. And the first thing which I'm kind of following is within the single project development scheme, where you always have the projects selected by the applicant production company, and usually is only the name of the production company without any details regarding the co-productions, because sometimes we have majority national co-productions, but sometimes we have minority national co-productions, and this is not visible. And I even got into the argument not knowing how this person exactly looks like until I met him last year in Cannes. He's representative of the Estonian Ministry of Culture, And then we got into discussion, and basically it was the matter of the wording for the new program, because I didn't understand why it could not be written that we kind of encouraged the transparency and visibility of the results. And he was very much against it. Anyway, he had more votes. I couldn't lobby much more through the Croatian Ministry of Culture, and it was rejected. And when I really kind of explained him what's going on, then he kind of understood the notion of the co-production, that it's very important for a small country, and it's important that we see who is actually involved. When it comes to the slate, you don't have projects listed. You only have the production company listed, and usually I always, in great collaboration with the Croatian producers, I always call them, we exchange, so I announce the proper result. Then when it comes to the beautiful network, because it's encouraging the visibility of the European films, Europa Cinemas, I personally as a desk, in order to give the national authorities and the public the overall results, I need to call a person responsible for the Croatian territory, and this information is given to me via email, but not with specifics, like how it's a total number of the cinemas with the total number of the amount devoted to the cinemas. I cannot get information which cinema and amount per cinema. And finally, we highlighted the selective distribution. On purposely, there are some zeros, and the low production capacity countries are not visible. And we come to the absurdity that national distributors cannot anymore apply directly, but they need to go through the sales agent. And now they're not visible at the national level. So of course that the sales agents, they come from Germany, France, there is one Scandinavian, and etc. And again, we need to ask this information the European Commission or the agency, to be precise, and they cannot announce it as the visible results. And this, in my personal and professional opinion, is endangering cultural diversity. So I'm not sure were you aware of the transparency and the issue of non-transparency, but how do you see it as being transparent and visible?
Okay.
You can take a different hat. So
these are a little bit, how to say, specific questions, and perhaps I'm not the best expert to answer your question, but I can tell you that for sure transparency is one of the bedrocks of the principles the European Commission and any European Union institution is working. So for sure there should not be even a shade of doubt that transparency should not be observed at any stage, especially when you talk about, for example, production, co-productions, and you have only the, let's say, the one producer mentioned there. This in no way contributes to the promotion of the diversity, for example, which is one of the aims of the media program. I think it's certain member states are having some companies are having their own agenda kind of promoted, but this should not be the case. I mean, transparency should be an overarching principle. And I just want to use this opportunity to also, how to say, refer to what you just said a while ago. Luís, I think you mentioned, you said that we need to be smart. I suggest that one of these things is that now we have new commissioner who is in charge of, among other things, also of the media program. And this commissioner comes, surprise, surprise, from Bulgaria. Yeah. Small country, low capacity country. Yeah. She is young, very energetic, and she always gets results. I can vouch for this because I used to work with her in her previous portfolio when she was commissioner.
You can say her name, Maria.
Yeah, Maria Gabriel. Mrs. Gabriel is going to visit us here several times during the term of the Croatian presidency, and I think we should make use of these visits and organize something similar with her. I'm sure, I don't know how far she's aware of this issue, but I'm sure that we can win her as a supporter of our ideas. And as far as I'm concerned, I can easily pass also the message. She will be coming already here next week for another event, but this is really an important issue that she has to be aware of. And I think the Commission has really need to come up with very strict and clear position on that.
This will be helpful and great, yeah. We already started the discussion 2 years ago when she first visited Croatia during the event celebrating 10 years of the Croatian membership in the media program, but it will be very helpful to continue. Thank you. Chris?
Yep. So, yeah.
How are you with this transparency?
I'm good with transparency.
Yeah?
I like transparency. But I think it's important to be concrete, constructive, and in being concrete, very specific. So yes, we're all good with transparency in principle. We need to really make clear what it is that we're asked, what we want specifically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, we'll support the principle. In terms of Mrs. Gabrielle, and we also have Monsieur Breton, who's a large capacity country, and so we have two commissioners we have to deal with, and I think we have to deal with both of them. My experience with Mrs. Gabrielle is very good. She was getting to them with the message, so having the 20 minutes you need can be difficult when you're talking about commissioners. But I was able to, on a concrete project I was lobbying at the time for another organization, not the MPA, I had to go to Sofia to meet with her. Because it was the only chance I was going to have to make an objective presentation, very concrete. The next day, she was supporting us. She understood, she listened, we ended up spending an hour together, and policy changed. So it's doable, and I do agree with you. She's a doer. So we should go to her, but again, it's got to be beyond principles. We have to say, look, Madame Gabrielle, do these 3 things. Right? So that's my contribution on transparency.
And finally, Luís.
Well, everybody agrees that transparency is important. That's everything that everybody could agree. But actually, it's also important in terms of accountability. I mean, we are all of us. We are spending this money, and it's fair to know for everybody, to the public, and especially for the appliance companies, to know exactly how the money was spent, why it was spent, and under which criterion it was spent. And that's important to consider that and that's part also of the level playing field, which is the proper access to information. And I think we always should fight for it, because nowadays, well, I think it's almost impossible sometimes to know if one film was supported, something was supported, as it's actually released, was it actually which amount, what results? So it's really hard to get information right now, and we should do something about it. Otherwise, it would be a very good excuse to end the program. So that's one of the risks we have to consider.
Can EFA help us? Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. We should really pay some attention on this, because the outcome of that is that, well, we don't have any results, so let's end it. So that's something we should, all of us should fight for, having proper results and proper transparency of the public policies we have.
Good. And the last question is dealing with the visibility of European cinema. So we already touched the issue. I can't hear, we have difficulties to see national films, but it's also very difficult to see any Bulgarian or Portuguese film in the cinemas. We also have this lack of cinemas now. But just to give you a hint, when you look at, you can't see it, but when you look at one of the columns, it's regarding the selective distribution, and it's been given to the sales agents. Sales agent already, they have their own call for proposals, and now they have a second one. So for a sales agent to sell a small film, they need to sell it to 10 territories. And throughout these 11 years, how Croatia is participating in the media program, so only 3 films were sold in such a way. So this is the High Sun being supported by the media program, the Priest Children not being supported in terms of the development via the media program, and the Constitution. And we've been supporting so around 40 films throughout these 11 years. The similar situation is with also any other films coming from small audiovisual capacity. This is one thing. The second thing is the media sub-program devotes 70% of the total budget to its promotion and distribution, and only 15% for the development. So, by the end of the story, what are you going to distribute if you won't have films? Or, finally, in other wording, so there is money, but it seems that we need to reallocate it in order to have even better visibility of these culturally diverse films. So this is just a small introduction to the topic of visibility and recognizability of European cinema, because some films travel and are visible more than others. So you already touched.
I couldn't agree more. I can tell you from what I've read that small steps in this direction are, for example, in enhancing this promotion and visibility. You have this Lumiere database on video on demand. Interestingly enough, I read that no matter that we have this rather nice database, there are only 29% of European films there, which should not be the case. I mean, we should be, in the video on demand, we should be promoting our films rather than any other films. And then you have also this Lux Film Prize, which is also meant to kind of promote European films, but not only the films as products, but also the topics they handle, they deal with during in the content. Probably one way out, and of course this is not enough. I mean, I just said these are just small steps in the right direction. I think this is a general problem for the Commission and for the European Union. We do so many good and positive things, but unfortunately we, for one reason or another, we don't either take pride in what we're doing, or we not self-promote ourselves. And I can give you millions of examples of why we still need an overall strengthening of our self-promotion mechanism, but this is an issue that is being, how to say, on the radar screen, and especially now with the, you know, that one of the priorities of the new Commission President, Mrs. von der Leyen, is that she wants to see the Commission as a geopolitical one, as a very strong player on all international fields. So the culture should be also part of it. So I think using, when you have the political kind of guideline, we should build on that, and coming with initiatives from the grassroots, from the ground. I would strongly recommend that you, I mean, be proactive and send this forward to the, let's say, to the political leadership, including when, for example, we organize a meeting with Commissioner Gabriel or Commissioner Breton.
The big and small, yeah. Chris?
Yes. So on visibility, there's clearly a lot that needs to be done. And I think there again, we have to be concrete. I suppose that somehow somebody at some stage thought that focusing more on agents would be a good thing, including for, it must have been justified on some basis, and if it's not working, it's not working. And I think we have to make the case. To me, visibility is crucial, and for us as a country, it's so far from what it should be now, and it has to be improved. And I think, while we should focus on cinema and on cinemas and on Eurocinema and the access to the networks and accessibility, we also need to think about the online exploitation. And there too, we have issues that need to be addressed. And there, it's essentially a brave new world. And we have the same questions coming up: visibility, prominence. How do you know that, Ankita's film is available somewhere on Netflix other than through Netflix itself? And so what they do matters. How they use artificial intelligence, how they use logarithms matters. They control visibility and prominence. And so we have to tend to those forward-looking issues, because otherwise 5 years from now we'll be looking at a world in which online streaming services will have overtaken broadcasters substantially, and cinemas, and we'll be crying in the same way, except that we will have missed the boat. So we have to focus on those issues. I'm sure, as presidency country now in this semester, our government and our Minister of Culture will be making some of these issues, some of these points in discussions within the Council, and also in public discussions. We're planning to have several public events where we will have an opportunity to highlight these issues in a constructive way, but in a clear and concrete way. Here in Zagreb at the end of March, there's a conference on media literacy, but with a panel also on this very issue. We need to be there, we need to speak, we need to make sure the decision makers hear us. In Cannes, there is going to be a ministerial level conference in which we will undoubtedly have Madame Gabrielle and Monsieur Breton and several ministers and MEPs. And it's another opportunity to talk about the importance of culture, of audiovisual, of media policy as something that should be uniting Europe. But that has its fragilities that need to be tended to, and I'm quite sure our minister will be there and making those points at the events. So that's my contribution on visibility.
You answered the second set of the question, because this is what all three of you have in common when it comes to the presidency. You used to run it and be involved. Now we are taking over, and Portugal is the next one. But first, I let Luís tackle the issue of the visibility of European cinema.
Well, obviously for the EFADs, the promotion of cultural diversity is the main issue, and we are very on to these matters. We had several meetings already with not only European policy makers, but also with some of the platforms, the most active platforms in our market. And as Chris mentioned, we have to be very on top of this, and we have to work closely with European institutions in order to guarantee that the proper cultural diversity is respected in each market. I mean, right now, having a policy just centralized on sales agents, it's obviously not enough, and we have to consider that our environment is much more complex than that, and the marketing tools that are used right now are clearly much ahead of our proper public policies on these matters. So when in all the talks we had, in order to guarantee the visibility of the European works, we had a response that obviously they are interested in the promotion of the cultural diversity if the public wants it, and that's something which is very tricky. First of all, we are not sure that that's the case. So if the public wants something, well, and it's not promoted, how can he wants that? And so some of the answers we had is that they were ready to send some what they call the curveballs, which is a very interesting term from baseball. I mean, it's not marketing directly something that the public doesn't want to see, but is a way of challenging the audience in some kind of new content that supposedly you're interested in. And then I'm talking about specifically the platforms. Well, that might be a way to ensure that our content is visible on some platforms, but we're sure that we have to gain more knowledge of the new marketing tools in order to address proper public policies that might defend the cultural diversity in the European environment. That's I think it's the main objective that we should all have. And I'm not sure that the Croatian presidency can solve that. And I'm not even
neutral, right?
You could lead the way.
We cannot say anything.
I think you could lead the way. I think you should lead the way and have the hard fights, and we can close it in Portugal. So so.
This is what we have in common.
We can sign in Lisbon.
But I really like EFAD's mission, and I'm quoting, so to enable local cultures, so this is your mission, and different language communities to see their lives represented on screen for powerful, culturally expressive films to deeply affect hearts and minds to the benefit of the well-being of society across Europe. And this is something that we need to strive for. Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you allow me just a general comment, don't forget that people that sit in Brussels and take the decisions, they're not necessarily experts.
This is so true.
And no, that's why I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're the ones here on the ground that have the knowledge and have the vision of the problems that you face on daily basis. So you should be the ones to, I would say, provide this. I mean, don't just accumulate this with yourself and just, say, okay, we are put in the corner and this is not fair. I mean, people there should be aware of, and because this information channel that needs to reach them is not necessarily working all the time properly. That's why I would really encourage you and all here present to be proactive.
Yes.
Yes, but they need to be asked, and then they need to be listened when they talk. Because, for example, not only for Croatia, working with Martina, I'm a producer, just to introduce myself. I also know very well the Slovenian media desk representative. I know a girl who works in Serbia as well. And I know that their contact with the producers, with the filmmakers, is great. So they are very well aware of what we are doing and what are our problems. And I'm positive that they are communicating that very well, but they need to be heard. This is the problem that I don't know how to solve. We all know, and they know, and we are very much, and we have ideas, but it is just, the ideas do not go through. For example, this thing with the sales agents, just to refer to that one. I'm sorry if I'm taking... No, because one of the films, one of the only 3 that were helped was mine. I produced it. And this film was sold at the end to 30 territories. But without this support, it would have been sold anyway. But the other film that this is this catch-22. Because this film of mine had an award from Cannes. So it was, it was sold anyway. But the other one that went to winning 30 awards all over the world, we didn't get any sales support because you need to sell it to 10 territories before you get the support. So, for example, today, I'm sure that Almodovar's film, Pain and Glory, will get this support, but Icelandic film, White Day, will not. And I really want to see this Icelandic film, and Almodovar I will see anyway. So, and you know it, we know it, but I don't know if we can pass this information to the right place.
Well, I mean, there is a note, because I studied Latin and ancient Greek and Sanskrit many years ago in the university. There is I remember a Latin proverb which says that the drop drills through the stone not with power but with constant. So I think this is one of the ways. Of course, this is a kind of a joke, but more seriously, I think we should still seize the opportunity that now there is a fresh political leadership. So far, they demonstrate preparedness to listen, and let's build on that, because otherwise we are going nowhere.
We would just like to be involved and included, because whenever us media desks are present at those meetings in Brussels, we are said there were some meetings, internal meetings with professional associations, and then we ask with whom, and then we don't get this answer. And so you need to respect then diversity also when it comes to the decision making. So not only regarding the films, but also all those people who already have the experience and were supported by the media. So invite them so that you hear where the problems, challenges are. Yeah, yeah. And just to reflect on the sales agent, I'm really curious who decides which film receives the media label. So it's always tricky. This also needs to be transparent. It needs to be somehow open in terms of the conditions, because this media label, film then gets easier support through the selective sales agent and automatic distribution. But just to be clear, automatic and selective distribution is the support for non-national EU films. So we need to also do something more when it comes vice versa. Since we already started somehow comments and questions from the audience, do you have maybe some questions or remarks for our panelists? Okay, I will be.
So why you didn't pay the lobbyists to lobby for the film industry in Brussels? I didn't see any money spent on that. Because it's obviously, if you say they are not here yet, so you need to put in the media, because nobody is protesting the same here. Because it's really not visible to the public that we have a problem at all. Even in Brussels, I mean, if you ask anybody in the politics, they say there's everything is fine, everybody is happy. So either you need to start doing marketing campaign or pay lobbyists to do it. That's the only way what I see there. It's like, why you don't spend money on that? That's small kind.
At least this is not visible, so it's only 14 calls by the media program. The rest I'm not aware of, so yeah. So do we need to pay the lobbyists? Chris, you have some experience.
Yeah, I guess I've been a paid lobbyist for decades actually in Brussels, and the answer is that you need lobbyists. I mean, I think we have people who could do the lobbying who need to be mandated. I was not paid per se for some of the lobbying I've done over the past 5 years, but I lobbied, and I had a mandate for going out, figuring out what I needed to achieve, how I was going to achieve it, and you need a bit of a budget. You have to be able to go to Sofia to meet with the commissioner, to figure out a way around the bureaucracy in Brussels. But it's not that mysterious, and it's actually not all it costs. You can pay a lot of money, or you can just find, but what you need is a clear set of goals. You need the following 3 things need to be done. I need transparency on this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. We need to know what the criteria are for the decisions to get the media label. I mean, it needs to be defined. But yeah, you need. I mean, lobbying is what we do. In a way, you are lobbying when you raise these points as you. but maybe it needs to be organized better.
Through effort.
Maybe, but you know, we have on some of these principles. I don't know if we could get the EFADs as a group to agree, and it may be that we need a smaller group.
It's easy to agree on
Mike.
big ideas. It's easy to agree on big ideas or wide concepts. It's a little bit hard to work on concrete measures. That's the same case with EFADs. It's the same case with European politicians. So it's very, very easy to agree on the concept of cultural diversity or level playing field or whatever, just like a broad concept. But when you get to the specifics, when you get to concrete measures, that's when it gets tricky. And even for the EFAD, sometimes we reach like a common ground position in a very specific subject. And when we reach that, we have the capacity, of course, of representing 35 countries and all of the European member states. And we have that capacity of representing through our governments and express ourselves in the European level in a way that we can be heard. But those are rare occasions, unfortunately.
My recommendation really would be that the countries, the small capacity countries or whatever it is that we have to call ourselves, would sit down and define the objectives that we're going for. It's not something that I imagine all of the efforts will support, but we can function in a combination of film agencies from those countries and the media colleagues to help us define what we go after, and then figure out how we get it, and, you know, how to do it, basically. But you need, you know, the colleagues from the media programs need to. I'm not sure I agree with that. No, of course, but it's not an EFAD. It's not an EFAD thing. This is a grouping of countries that have a common interest that are. I think not undermine other people. There is a diplomatic concept, which is I tend to agree, which is coming from boxing. I'm very sportive today, which is we should punch above our weight. And even if we come from smaller countries or countries with industries that are not as strong as others, we should fight ourselves in. And in EFADs, within the EFADs, and yeah, I think it's a proper way to fight it and try to create a common position from the EFADs that includes our views on this subject. It clearly has to be discussed within the EFADs as well, but there's no reason why a smaller group of countries with the shared focus on a set of issues couldn't bring those to the EFAD table and say, look, this is what we need. We would like to have EFAD help, but we are going to try to get this done. And you know, let's see what that really is. Most of the time on lobbying projects that have some element of challenge, there's always a sense of, well, we can't do that. They won't let us do it. We can't do it. That's experience shows otherwise. I also wanted to comment on something that was said earlier. There's this sort of, you know, there's not an interest in diversity. If the people don't want to see it, you can't make them watch it or something like that. That was the same in 1988, 89, when the first television directive was being debated. People said, no, and policymakers, including some in Brussels, certainly the Americans, no, the public wants to watch 80% American series on television, and so you can't change that. No, you know, and that was just totally wrong. And the directive was a stimulus to get us to a different place that we were being told people didn't want to go to. It turns out they did. They just didn't know, because what? No visibility, no awareness, no whatever. So it can, you know, I don't accept those arguments per se on face value, for sure not. Sorry.
No problem, I see. The thing is that I really appreciate that you're all here because small countries are not trying to make any revolution. It's just the results are showing something different. And it's a bit endangering what Europe is. for the cultural diversity and for having access to all calls for proposals. Just to give you the last example, and then we are coming to the closure. So first we had in 2014 until 2017 audience development, which was functioning quite well because it was really bringing the film into the cinema, some unusual places, and the Kino Mediterrane, later represented by Alan, was the partners in one of those projects. And then all of a sudden it was cancelled without any explanation, switched to film education, and it came to such an absurd in 2019 that it was clearly said to us that it was meant for only one applicant. And then we were like, okay, so how am I going to promote this call anyway? Because we also need to promote all 14 calls. In the end, you know who got it? 1 million euros went to the French Institute for the film education. So those are the things that we can maybe, we can do something about it, because this is not good, this is not okay. And we also have nice film education activities. They also need to be promoted. So after all, also this year, we're going to organize the conference on this specific theme. We are opening the Brick House, focusing on the film education during the Rijeka European Capital of Culture. Only a space for the kids and the film and media activities within the Brick House. I'm aware that you need to leave. Yeah, you used to have the duties by running the presidency in Bulgaria, but now you have a different hat, and you also still have some obligations. So I would like to close the first panel. I appreciate you participating and listening to us, and now we know that we are on the same side. And we just want to have the healthy and culturally diverse environment in the future. So thank you all. Thank you.